Hello and welcome to the GamerRoos Podcast. Today is February 6th, 2024, and I'm joined today by Alexander.
Just me today, unfortunately. Persona 3 Reloaded is finally out on, I think, pretty much every console except the Switch. So if you have not picked up Persona 3 Reloaded, I absolutely advise that you pick it up because... I don't know. I don't think they actually changed it from the original Persona 3 format, so the story's probably still a paced disaster, but hey, let's let Atlas know we want to see remakes so we can get a Persona 1 remake.
Will they actually remake Persona 1?
Probably not.
Yeah,
but if we try hard enough...
A man can dream.
Unironically, I actually think the game's going to flop because there's only like 3,000 reviews on Steam.
Oh, really?
Most of them are positive, but it's like they're positive in the sense that none of them are actually like giving you feedback. It's just like, I'm going to summon my persona with a gun.
Oh, yeah.
It's crap.
Now, well, that's kind of the give and take with PC gamers. And remakes in general, really, the way that a lot of people come back. Like, I remember I was in the comment section of this one YouTube video about Call of Duty Ghosts, and they highlighted the only people coming back are the ones with fond memories in the first place. Because you'll have, like, I don't know, however many millions of people that played COD Ghosts, however many millions of people that either didn't like it or didn't care for it. But the only people coming back, like, a decade later are the people who liked it. So that's when you get that kind of feedback loop of, oh, yeah, I like Ghosts, because I'm the only one talking about it. So people get a bad, or at least an incorrect understanding of the feeling towards a game like that. I mean, it's got to straddle that weird line,
And I kind of, I'm in the same boat in terms of Persona 3 because I know that old school fans have unironically stayed quiet. I've only seen Persona 5 fans really be excited for Persona 3. And I've noticed that old school fans just kind of, especially in the Persona community, they don't really like to praise future games. It's just kind of like it doesn't give them the same emotional attachment that the Persona 3 gave them, so they're really critical of future games.
You always remember your first.
Exactly. But I think personally I didn't really like Persona 3 because I thought the story was just garbage. It was paced horribly, but I'm still I think Persona 3 has a good premise, and if they're going to fix some of the issues Persona 3 had, I think it could be a very philosophically enjoyable game.
Yeah.
I just don't think they did it. Because the literal person who was directing this game said they wanted to keep it very much identical to the original game.
Yeah, writing is one of those things where unless it's a very universal understanding, it's so difficult to change the writing of an established product without alienating the original fan base and not attracting the people who didn't care for the premise to begin with. If the premise isn't there, then
That's kind of like Persona 3 did, is they went to this they kind of tried to make Persona 3 Persona 5 because Persona 5 was a very visually appealing game, so if they followed the same trend, people were more prone to play it.
Makes sense.
The only problem, though, is that Persona 3 isn't Persona 5, and Persona 5's flashiness is literally meant to, symbolize rebellion, but Persona 3 is, very gloomy because it's meant to symbolize memento mori and death.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to make a game about literal death and the philosophy behind it incredibly flashy, it just kind of starts to defeat the premise. And there's just one really awkward line where Junpei in Tartarus says something like, "Man, I like Fuka, but I miss Mitsuru-senpai." It kind of felt like getting stepped on. And then Mitsuru says, "I'm not sure what you mean, but do you want to be punished?" And I'm just like, some unnecessary fan service that's kind of going on here. It's like I'm really worried about what they did.
How do you? You know what? Never mind. I don't want to discuss this anymore. Yeah. Anyways, to the main subject of today's podcast. I don't know if you've heard. It's kind of been. I don't know. I didn't hear about it until I want to say 2 days ago. But there are some rumors going around that Xbox might be stepping out of the console race. With the introduction of the OG Xbox back in, 2001, 2002, possibly till 2024. Xbox has historically not been especially profitable for the Microsoft Corporation in general, and they've always been neck and neck with PlayStation, basically since PS3. This most recent console generation has been a horror show. you've had the chip shortages, you've had ballooning game budgets, you've had the increase from $60 to $70 price tags in spite of primary method of purchasing these days being digital purchases, and just a million other issues that have been greatly weighing down on this console generation. And if this is anything to go by, if the rumors are anything to go by, Xbox might say, you know what, we've had a good run, but we are not renewing, or we are not going to be releasing a new console generation, and we will be taking our IPs multi-platform, and we will just be pulling a Sega, and thanks for playing. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know. Again, it's just leaks, so please take this with a massive grain of salt. But thoughts, Alex?
So I don't have a really positive opinion on just Xbox in general. I've always did grow up with PlayStation, but for me with PlayStation, it's like there were a lot more titles that released for PlayStation than they did Xbox. And if you really notice, like, the games that released for Xbox, you don't get, like, some of, like, the Final Fantasy games didn't release for Xbox, like, until decades later when the remasters came out. But Final Fantasy games kept releasing on PlayStation. Those were, like, the ones that most people got those games on first. So Xbox was really secluded in what kind of games they were releasing. Mm-hmm. They only really had one target audience that they were for. That's why there's, like, a lot more people who are into, like, first-person shooters that play Xbox, because that's what the target audience that people who are making Xbox games were going after.
Right.
But because first-person shooters aren't dying, they're just not becoming as popular anymore. Mm-hmm. And because of that, they're not becoming as profitable, and people aren't wanting to buy Xboxes, especially with the rise of PC gaming. Mm-hmm. People are just getting them on Steam or Epic Games instead of having to get them through console. And I'm also not going to lie, personally, consoles are less effective than the PC. Like, right. You can get a Steam account, hopes it doesn't get hacked, and have, like, all of your games, and then if your PC breaks, get a new PC, all your games are back. You have, like, an Xbox break or, like, a massively bad shortage happen in it to where you can't even get the data anymore, then you're really screwed.
I mean, I contest the pulling of data. I don't think the Steam Cloud is advanced enough to where it's going to pull all your save data. Like, I've restarted a couple games going from PC to PC. Mm-hmm. But I see your point. You just have so much more backwards compatibility with the mm-hmm. PC. You have access to a much larger library of games. And generally speaking, a lot of the people that grew up in the last, I want to say generation, I want to say Gen Z, has embraced the PC far, far more than previous generations.
It just became more optimal.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, like, if you consider how, like, me and you were both early 2000s, mm-hmm. PCs back then, you really only could use to play games like Jumpstart or Reader Rabbit or, like, really weird Flash games mm-hmm. because the hardware was very limited. But then it's like the PC kind of got upgraded, and they started upgrading the hardware, and then it was just more accessible to have a computer that can do everything instead of having a computer and then, like, 12 consoles to play different games. Well, why not just release them all on one console? It saves money in production.
I would again contest that mm-hmm. That idea. Generally speaking, there were PC exclusives, and there was a very thriving PC scene. Like, even back, I want to say the original Penny Arcade comics were primarily a PC oriented. But there still absolutely was a PC scene back in the late 90s. I mean, there was, even in the run up to Doom, they were getting emails and stuff like that from all over the country from a lot of these, well, let's call them what they are, basement nerds that advised Doom, and even prompted the inclusion of nightmare difficulty, just because ultra-violence wound up being too easy for a lot of people. So there absolutely was that scene. We didn't see that just because, we were growing up with, like, Dad's old tax machine or something.
Yeah, the very useless tack machine that ran on dial-up. Honestly, I'm being 100% honest. I'm going back and playing some of these old school games, and I'm just sitting here like, if I didn't have freaking GameFrax, somebody who had literally made a guide explaining how to do this, I would have never got this as a child. And I cannot imagine being like the early 2000s using the worst speed internet, going on GameFrax, trying to look up a guide. Mm-hmm. It takes like a half an hour for the webpage to load.
The jump from consoles to PC was a huge leap back then, especially because, like, Microsoft, they were, they liked the PC gaming at first, but they kind of dialed that back a lot when they got into the console race with the, let's call it what it is, the budget gaming PC that was the original Xbox. Mm-hmm. They massively decreased the amount that they wanted publishers to publish on the PC. And so for a while there was something of a dark age for PC gaming. Mm-hmm. They tried to bring it back sort of in the middle of the generation with, I want to say, like Games for Windows Live, which always sucked. Fallout 3 was trapped in Games for Windows Live for the longest time, and GTA 4 still is suffering the effects of it to this day. But yeah, the PC releases really only started becoming comparable, I want to say, in the middle of the 7th generation, and they really, really hit their stride at the end of it and really into the 8th generation of consoles, and basically blew them out of the water by the time the 8th console generation ended and the 9th started. Just it's expected that you're going to have a PC release for a lot of these releases. It's expected that you're going to, it's always going to have the better graphics. It's probably going to have the better control scheme. If it's anything, Twitch. I mean, you can still have like controllers and gamepads, and that's convenient for a lot of games. But with the rise of more competitive, I mean, you're always going to go for a PC just to have that acuity with a mouse. You can do that. I knew some guys who had Xbox Ones where they just invested in keyboards and mice. I remember that for Modern Warfare 2019. You can still do that on an Xbox.
I think when it comes to Xbox specifically, it's like, I don't want to harp on PlayStation too much. Well, I kind of do.
We'll get to them.
Well, I don't know. It's weird because when you start bringing up like how like the Xbox can kind of almost operate as like a half-baked internet browser, why invest in an Xbox when you can invest in a PC and get 2 times the games? Because, and I really think Xbox and PC exclusive games have a tendency just to ruin systems, because it's like, man, I'm really into the Persona series, but they only release on PS4, but I only have an Xbox. And then it's like when you start getting into like some JRPGs, they never have Xbox releases. They only release for PS or PC, and then you're just completely screwed in terms of what you want to play. So it's like, I feel like Xbox didn't put their foot in enough water, and they got really like game exclusive.
They tried to in Japan. It's just, a lot of Xbox has famously never found a good niche in the Japanese market. Like, I mean, we're talking selling maybe, I want to say like the Xbox One only ever sold like maybe 100,000 units in Japan. I'm probably wrong in that assessment, but we're talking like a minuscule amount compared to like Switch and PlayStation and adoption of mobile gaming.
Mobile gaming really did hurt the market for PC gamers, I know.
This is all to say that Xbox had a lot of different, well, PlayStation too, but Xbox probably felt it more because Xbox has never been a flagship product for Microsoft. Like, Microsoft makes bank selling PCs to like companies, schools, that sort of thing. Every computer in UMKC minus Macs in the art department are PCs.
Yeah, they're Microsoft.
And so Microsoft, has always been trying to throw the unlimited Gates bucks at the console wars, and it just hasn't really been working. That's why Xbox went on a tear and bought all those publishers. But it just really hasn't been making the money on the back end, even with all the exclusives they were trying to get over PlayStation. And again, all these things apply to PlayStation too. Not, you know what I mean. It's just the problem is that PlayStation is basically the flagship product for Sony. They have the larger install base, and quite frankly, it's what's keeping Sony as like a large corporation afloat, because they got the rinky-dink money they get through music contracts, and that's nice, and they have their technology and all that, but they're not making a ton of money off the profit margins for technology, especially in such a competitive field. So PlayStation really is like their one area in which they can shine. And again, even for PlayStation, it barely turns a profit. If PlayStation goes belly up, Sony goes belly up, or at least has massive restructuring.
I actually forgot that Sony didn't just make the PlayStation, that they actually did music at some point.
Exactly.
I think I had a Sony speaker. I completely forgot that that was also their forte. I really think it's not just Microsoft that's kind of like being affected, because I feel like the question I kind of ask here is like, what game is exclusive on the PS4 that it didn't release on Steam or Epic Games?
By this point, it's Bloodborne.
Oh gosh, that is true.
The joke for the past, oh my god, I want to say 2 decades now, basically since the PS3 launched, is that PlayStation has not had any good luck with exclusive games. I mean, you can kind of argue, but like everything either releases, eventually to PC, or like the problem with just this generation especially is that there's not a whole lot of like brand new games that have been pulling a lot of attention to really either console, because like Halo Infinite went and flopped, and a lot of Sony's movie games, they garner a lot of positive attention, but the problem is that like they don't recoup enough money to recoup their losses, excepting like some, the ones that set the world on fire, like the God of War reboot. Excuse me. Last of Us 2 famously didn't sell very well.
Last of Us. Oh gosh. Okay, but like Last of Us 2 is not Sony's.
That's not Sony's fault strictly.
That was who made that game again?
That was Naughty Dog, primarily helmed by Neil Druckmann, and the horror stories from Last of Us 2's production. Oh God, should have disqualified it from Game of the Year.
Dude, I'm being honest. The Last of Us 2 shot its own foot because people were all. When the Sonic movie got released and everybody started like complaining how the Sonic design looked, and then Sega went back and changed it. When The Last of Us 2 even got hinted at, they had already hinted half the plot, and everyone was mad, and they didn't listen, they didn't change it, and it was very unsatisfiable to most of the target audience, and then people didn't enjoy it.
Well, see, the problem is that like prior to I don't know if Neil came in like Uncharted 4, but they had revamped on Last of Us 2 like twice by the time that I think Neil had come in, and he revamped the whole thing again, and they threw out a ton of assets, they threw out a ton of motion capture they had already done, a ton of story beats, brought everybody back in, and we're talking about like, what was it, like year and a half, 2-year crunch to get it out for, I want to say it was like 2019, 2020.
I think it was 2020.
It was 2020.
Yeah.
We're talking like this is Red Dead Redemption, Wives of Rockstar type shit, and just to revamp the story and to do that stupid plot they do these days where like, they talk about the perils of revenge, or like, the base idea of what if we follow a mook in, what would be a video game, just one random person you shoot at some point. That's sort of an interesting idea on paper, but then it turns into a bad like, well, revenge is, dig two graves type situation that is always fumbled incorrectly. Like, what they're getting at, but like, it's such a stupid plot.
Yeah, I don't know what it is with modern storytelling, just not knowing how to properly convey messages anymore, and they're just kind of like, sometimes it feels like this is something a Wattpad novice writer is kind of producing.
Yeah.
But that kind of ties into, I think, a big issue I kind of started seeing with a lot of like Xbox exclusive games, mostly looking at like the late stage Call of Duty and the late stage like Halo stopped. There's no new Halo game, is there?
Well, Halo Infinite released a couple years back, but the problem was it was a decent idea on paper, but it just wasn't fun.
That was kind of like the problem. I think what the big issue I'm noticing with gaming companies is they keep just trying to repeat old formulas instead of trying to make something new. But I think I can't blame them because it's like making newer formulas is becoming like super difficult, and they don't.
It's not that they can't. You still get like all these brand new releases. We were talking about Flavor of the Month games last week, and even though I have my disdain for them, all those are new IPs. Among Us, Lethal Company, Pal World. Well, okay, maybe not Pal World.
Pal World's a different story.
Yeah, but they're all supposed to be new releases, and you can have these new ideas, and that's what the indie scene is capitalizing on right now. You have these people going from like franchise to franchise to franchise that are basically just single games being pumped out by indie studios. People have an appetite for new games. It's just if you're going to commit hundreds of millions of dollars for these legacy IPs, you have to make sure they're as palatable as possible, and they're going to be pushed as much as possible by the console manufacturers. And it's just because they're committing so much money. Like, you see this with movies. I want to say Disney dropped $1 billion on Indiana Jones 5, and they made maybe $400 million back.
Yeah.
And everybody hated it, and people didn't go to see the movie, and now they have this gigantic, just stinking bomb that they can't recoup on. They can put it on Disney Plus, but people aren't using Disney Plus anymore. And
well, the only thing people use Disney Plus for is either for Fox things like Family Guy or The Simpsons, or to watch old school stuff. And in all honesty, though, with Disney, like, nobody wants to watch their new stuff. Like, their new stuff is like you're eating a food with absolutely no seasoning. It's so like
it's bland. It's
just bland and regurgitated. It's like all of what you're doing in this story has already been done, and it's being done in the exact same way it was as it was done on other games. I was even noticing that the other day. I was comparing like how stories were wrote to like other games, and I'm like, oh wow, these are literally following the same exact premise.
And you have that kind of regurgitation that we've been seeing for the, basically the latter end of the 8th console generation and into the 9th console generation. That's inspired a lot of apathy from consumers. Video game prices went up, and I can understand why with inflation and all that, but at the same time, it's like that's also deterring the consumer. You have an audience that really is looking at the consoles and going like, well, there's really nothing here that's exclusive that I couldn't get on my PC. Mm-hmm. And on my PC, I'm going to get better frame rates. I'm going to have access to mods. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have a much better company to buy from in Steam. I mean, Steam has its issues, but not to the extent of like Xbox or, God forbid, Sony.
Gosh.
And so, you can have this thing that you set up on your own. And you have so much more control. And I mean, for like hobbyist video gamers like yourself and I, that is like the dream. And everybody's going to PC gaming because it's just simply such a, I mean, quite frankly, the death knell of console gaming was that every time you open up an Xbox and you're like, I want to play a video game, and you open it up and it makes you sit there, look like staring at the update screen for like 20 minutes while something downloads, and it's like, well,
I hate when that freaking happens. Like, that was one thing that aggravated the crap out of me, is it's like, okay, I want to play some BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle. Uh-oh, your system's not updated. Wait 4 hours for it to update itself so you can access online features. You don't have that problem on... That's also another thing. You don't have that problem on Steam. Mm-hmm. But, like, if you want to play a game like... You want to play any online game on PlayStation 4, you physically have to have PSN Plus or... I think Xbox Game Pass to even access online features, and also
it's so draconic, and that's why people are stepping away from consoles.
Yeah, it's like, I pay for my internet. I don't want to have to pay.
I pay for the internet. I don't want to pay for an internet service on top of that. And that was people's criticism with Xbox Live Gold, and it finally 15 years later it killed them.
It's actually what that people criticize PlayStation for that too, and I think the criticism was like valid, or the reason was that the technology evolves, we have to start charging for these features. But the problem is that with PC gaming on the rise, the fact that is a thing is now actually hindering the development. Like back in like the days where PS4 had first released, PC gaming, especially on the online scene, still wasn't as popular as it was on console. Now it's no longer consoles are not becoming as popular because PC gaming is just becoming more superior. And It's like, oh, I want to play COD with my friends. Well, if I do it on Xbox, I have to pay additional $10 to even access online functions, or I can just get
it's PC. It's not going to update when the console's off. And crossplay being, pre-crossplay being what it was. If my buddy was on PlayStation, I was, it's not as universalist as a PC. Just because the guy's playing on Alienware and I'm playing on a Dell, that sort of thing. But this is all to say that all these reasons, and more, quite frankly, that we can't fit into this episode, were the reasons why the console market has been winding back. And for that reason, it would not surprise me if Xbox does say, you know what, we've had a good run, we're going multi-plat. And you know what, if they did that, I'd say, it's been good knowing you.
Fair enough.
I'll buy a Series X just, for the sake of saying, it's like owning a Dreamcast by that point.
Yeah.
And eventually people are going to find out ways to jailbreak it. I'm going to have that kind of... Oh my God! Could you imagine the emulation on a Series X once you unlock that power? Yeah. Oh my God! I got it. Whew. But we would like to remind everybody that this is just a leak that we've heard. I actually saw a leak prior to sitting down right now that the Xbox is actually planning on a Switch derivative, possibly.
Oh gosh! Oh my gosh! Ew.
So basically Generation 10, but with a Switch derivative instead of a Series S, which I don't think is a good idea because that didn't really work for Steam either.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. Even the Switch doesn't work as properly. People think Nintendo's got handheld consoles down, and they did up to the DS, but the Switch was a massive disappointment. Look at some of the games that release on that. If it's not Fire Emblem or Mario, there is absolutely no reason to use a Switch. Unless you really like the portable feature, like to have games like Persona on the go, but the graphics... The graphic depletion that you're going to have to deal with is just not worth it. But I will say... PlayStation or Sony also dampered with like handheld consoles. We saw that with the PSP and the PSP Vita.
Oh, did you see? Mm-hmm. Sony's allegedly going to try their hands at a PSP 2. Maybe.
Oh boy.
It's going to be with PS6 possibly. Whenever that happens.
Yeah, whenever that. Dang. So we're going to get the PSP 2 before GTA 6. I will say, though, the one thing I hate about having a PSP is that you physically could not access online features unless you had, for some reason, T-Mobile.
Oh, yeah.
It was so stupid. I remember one day I'm like, I'm going to get Persona 3 Portable for my PSP. So I start trying to like access Wi-Fi features, and it's like, you can't do this unless you have T-Mobile. I'm like, I need T-Mobile just to use my PSP's internet? Who came up with this?
Is that PlayStation's not going to put in the effort to really capitalize on it, because Switch is, gangbusters for handheld gaming. So they'll probably put out a nice showing at first, and it'll be a nice, cool console to have. Mm-hmm. But beyond being a hardware pairing with the PS6, I don't see it. I did want to briefly cover the possibilities of a post-Xbox world if it does just come down to PlayStation and Nintendo, as was foretold in the sixth generation of consoles. Because if Xbox goes multi-platform, that's fine. Like, Xbox has had a friendly relationship with Nintendo for the longest time, and I can see them wanting to start porting stuff to the Switch just to get their brand further out there. This is to say, I quite frankly, you're going to see like the $600 PS3 again.
Oh gosh.
Which, I think if Sony sees that, because they do have a decent market share still, and Sony's like, it's got to work or we all fail. I can see them saying like, oh hey, Xbox is out of the race. Guess who's charging $1,000 for the PS6? Because you either have the PS6 or you go Switch. Or you go PC, but you don't want to go PC, and everybody's going to be like, I want to go PC. And then, congratulations, you just killed console gaming. Yeah. And Michael Jackson. But that's a different matter.
My thoughts are, in terms of like a post-Xbox, I definitely see Switch. I definitely see just Nintendo dominating in that field. Because it's like, I'm sorry, but like I don't really know who's playing PlayStation anymore. Like, even the new Suicide Squad game that just came out literally released for Steam too. Like, there's no reason to play it on console anymore, because consoles are just not as everyone predicted this was going to happen, and I kind of always saw that Microsoft would be the first to step out. But like, I think what we're going to see is just a lot more Xbox games essentially either be ported to Switch and be awful, or be on more of just a PC basis. We're going to see a lot more Minecraft stuff, even though Minecraft Legends was an absolute flop.
I think my brother has that game.
It's so trash.
Is it?
It's like the lowest reviewed game ever.
Oh.
It's that bad. It got super scrapped and stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's like, I think I don't really see it changing much of like how the ground is now, other than most people who are like Xbox diehards are probably going to start just switching to PC gaming.
Yeah. If they step out of the console market, I truly do think it's going to be a Sega thing, where they just, kind of take that L.
In the defense, though, I don't understand Sega's motives when they were even in the console war, because they were competing with Nintendo, and most of their games were just not like, I don't know what it is, just the Sega Dreamcast, it just literally felt like a cheaper version of the SNES, and it played like with Xbox, it played less games. It played very like Sega exclusive games, and then it had some games that were made by third party developers.
I mean, you always have to have a token. It's sort of like Coke v Pepsi. Even if the market share really isn't there, you do have to have the token competition. Just because there's always going to be that kind of people, or those kinds of people that don't care for a particular console, and they're going to want to try something else. So I can see that. That's kind of what Xbox has been to PlayStation the past, this console generation, the last console generation. They've basically been the competition. But if they're stepping out, then PlayStation's kind of in a spot where they can start, gouging you. And Nintendo's gone blue ocean for like 3 generations now, so they don't care.
Nintendo is just not. Nintendo's not going anywhere.
I mean, I could maybe see Nintendo doing a full power console if Microsoft backs out, but that means stepping so far out of their comfort zone. Like, maybe they continue the Switches as like their handheld of choice for the time being, but I mean, it's just
I really just don't foresee them ever going back to
full power. Yeah,
there's just no point. Like, the thing that their most sold devices were handheld. The whole point was that they were easy, games that you could take on the go. That's what their marketing came. Of course, there was the Wii and the Super Nintendo, but like when you compare those to like the sales of like the DS's or the GameCube or the Game Boy, it's like they took off so much more with handheld. And I think maybe they might go full console, but it's like I just don't think.
If nobody steps up, I can see them trying, It's just the problem is the last 3 times that they've gone full power with the Wii U, with the GameCube, and with the N64 have all underperformed to varying degrees of failure.
Yeah, the N64 was something else, man.
Yeah.
The only game I can think that was good on that was either the Mario games or Donkey Kong and a couple Kirby games, and that's about it.
I mean, I don't know. It's difficult for somebody in my generation to really appreciate the N64.
I had one.
Oh.
So I know. That awful Superman game. Then there's no time to waste. Fly through 12 hoops in the matter of a minute with the worst controls.
Oh, if you get through half the game, it actually turns into a proper video game, don't you know?
It does?
It actually turns into like a kind of beat-em-up sort of game.
You just have to do that stupid...
You have to do the rings for like half the game, and then it actually turns into a proper video game, and it still sucks. But eventually the game ends.
Eventually.
Yeah, I know.
Oh man, there was something I was going to say. I was going to say one thing that I've noticed in terms of why Nintendo has always remained so profitable is notice how many games Nintendo has actually made. Games like Sony and Microsoft really don't have any original games they made. Every game they have is either bought from another company or is...
yeah, it's either published by a third party. I mean, you had a decent... I mean, a couple that Sony tried with. And Xbox... I mean, yeah, with Xbox, it was always... Until they started bringing third parties into the fold as second-party publishers, then yeah, it really... Yeah. So the post-Xbox world is not one that I'd like to live in, so I really hope these leaks are false. But at the same time, if that's what happens, at the same time, I can't be surprised.
It would just be the way that it would end up going. And I don't personally have a problem with whatever happens to Xbox because I never really got into the Xbox console. I always hated Xbox because... there's one thing I hated the most. It was the fact that your batteries died every 5 freaking seconds.
I'd like to wrap up this episode with one more sports reminder. Again, the Super Bowl is next Sunday. So the 11th, we're going to be facing the 49ers, and it's going to be a great game. I don't really care for football. I've made that pretty evident in some of the earlier seasons. But, well, you know. Anyways, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And go Chiefs!
Critical hit.